Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy Podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson. I will be your host. It is August 15th, 2024. And in this episode, I am going to be giving you my top 5 zero RB targets heading into the 2024 fantasy football season. Before we get into all that, make sure you are following or subscribed wherever you are listening to this podcast so you can stay tuned for more fantasy football goodness and become a fantasy football prodigy. Now, let's dive right into it. So first of all, what is a zero running back draft approach? Okay, we're going to be talking about that in this episode, but we first got to figure out what that is. So really quick, real briefly, this is a draft strategy predicated on the idea that running backs are replaceable and they have high injury risk, so it's not worth spending high draft capital on them. That's one lens of it. The other lens is you're doing your draft and you keep taking really good value on wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends, etc. And you just happen to not draft too many running backs early on, and that's just how your team forms. In my opinion, and I think most people would agree with this, it's not smart to head into a draft with a predetermined strategy to employ a zero running back approach. You don't want to pass up on running back value just because you decided before the draft that you're going to go zero RB. Like, if you're in the first, second, and third round, you don't want to pass up workhorse stud running backs just because you decided ahead of time, oh, I'm going to draft running backs late. I'm going to take some receiver I don't really believe in, or I'm going to reach on a quarterback. Like, you kind of want to let the draft still fall to you. But even with that being said, in this video, even if you don't go full zero RB, or in this podcast, I should say, because we're not just on YouTube anymore, we're everywhere. We're worldwide. But even if you don't go full zero running back, there are still going to be some valuable players that you can take away from this episode and some late round running back values in general. But like I said, you don't just want to pass up on running back value just to go zero RB. But if the draft does fall that way, you get some great wide receiver value, or you load up on those onesie positions early, you get a quarterback like Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen, you get an early tight end like a Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, someone like that, true difference makers at those onesie positions if you're in a non-superflex, then zero RB might be the right strategy to use in that situation. If and when that happens, you want to make sure that you are getting late round value on running backs, and you are going to need these guys to start for your team early. That's the key part here. In that situation, handcuffs or unknown running backs are not as valuable for zero running back teams, as you need people who can start right away. So people like Trey Benson or Blake Corum, who were drafted, they have some hype. They're the backups, but they have some opportunity ahead of them. Maybe down the stretch, they can make some noise. They might be valuable later in the season, or if an injury occurs, but you need things to develop for them to start providing fantasy value. And they are not going to be targets that we're discussing in this podcast, because we need guys who can make an impact week one. While those guys can be rostered on a zero running back team, because, you have, depending on your bench size, you might have room for some bench stashes at the running back position. But generally speaking, a zero RB team needs to make sure they have starting options at running back. Otherwise, you risk starting the season, 0-4, because you're sacrificing too much of a point differential at that running back position. You don't want to throw away the year before it even starts. A zero running back team might not be drafting a running back until round 7 or even later. If you're drafting all wide receivers and you fill up those quarterback and tight end positions, it might be pretty late before you even draft your first running back. So we're looking for guys who can have a role and who can be started early. And zero running back teams want to make sure that you're monitoring the waiver wire throughout the season as injuries occur. And the landscape changes, because your team, it's already true that your team, when you leave the draft, it is not going to be the same as championship week. And that is especially true with zero running back teams. You're going to have to make waiver wire additions, maybe make some trades, and you're going to want to pounce on things as news breaks. Pause. Now, before we get more into it, again, before I give you my top 5 zero running back targets, please make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you are listening. and we're going to dive into some zero running back targets for the 2024 fantasy football season. I will be using Fantasy Pros ADP to determine value. I also kind of glanced at the Fantasy Football Calculator website. But it's just important that you apply what you hear in this podcast to your own league, as ADP can be different between different platforms. It can also be different between different leagues. If your league is full of fans of a certain team, teams from that team or players from that team might go early. So it's just important to take the information you learn here and apply it to your drafts accordingly. Form your own opinions. Look past the listed ADP on the platform and just get value in your draft and win the league. With that being said, let's jump right into our first zero running back target of the episode, and that is going to be one of my favorite values in all of fantasy football, Raheem Mostert, running back of the Miami Dolphins. So Devon Achane, fellow Dolphins running back, is all the hotness in Miami, and I do get it. After a historically efficient and overall just electric rookie year in 2023, I get why people want him on the squad. This is not an anti-Achane take as much as it is a pro-Dolphins offense and running back room take. I think both Achane and Mostert can and will succeed, and I expect them to be arguably the most dynamic running back duo in the entire league. The difference between these two players is that you can get Mostert, who is going in the 6th or 7th round, kind of from what I've ascertained from looking at ADPs, at about the running back 25. You can get him several rounds later than Devon Achane, who is going in like the 2nd or 3rd round as about the running back 11. And I will be using half PPR scoring and ADP in this podcast as well. Also, before we get more into it, please make sure it's August 15th. Monitor the news. Things will change. They change fast in the NFL. So if I'm talking about someone and they're hurt or something changed, just remember, I'm recording this August 15th. Things can change. But as of now, get back to Mostert and Achane. While Achane did flash league-winning upside in 2023, and I actually think he's a pretty good pick in fantasy drafts just because of his league-winning potential, let's not forget that Raheem Mostert was literally the running back 2 in fantasy behind only Christian McCaffrey. Not a running back 2, the running back 2 overall. He was ahead of guys like Travis Etienne, Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and, well, everyone not named Christian McCaffrey. He was the running back 3 overall in points per game on the back of just over 1,000 rushing yards, 175 receiving yards, but he had an insane 21 total touchdowns, 18 rushing, and 3 receiving. Mostert was mostly healthy all season before missing the final 2 weeks of the regular season, but he has dealt with injuries throughout his career, and at age 32, that is more of a concern to me than Devon Achane's involvement, as I think both can succeed in Mike McDaniel's offense on efficient touches and scoring opportunities. Now, with that being said, I don't expect a repeat of 2023. I certainly don't think he'll be scoring 20 touchdowns. That is just an extreme outlier, and you just don't, it's not a smart bet to think that's going to happen again. But I do think Raheem Mostert is pretty much a lock to return on his draft value as long as he stays healthy. And that has always been kind of the thing with him. Can he stay healthy? But even if he misses a handful of games, he will be valuable whenever he is active and on the field. The team just signed him to an extension through the 2025 season, and he was great last year, so I see no reason why he shouldn't be a solid value in fantasy on one of the most running back friendly offenses in the entire NFL. He is not only a great zero running back target, but he is a great draft day value in general. That is my first zero running back target. And like I said, some of these guys I think you should be drafting regardless of your strategy, and he is one of them, okay? We're going to move on to our next zero running back target, and that is going to be a duo. I know, a bit of a surprise here, but I'm going with Zack Moss and Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Mixon is out, Zack Moss is in, and Chase Brown is still there. The Bengals had a rough 2023. Joe Burrow had a slow start dealing with that calf injury, and then he eventually went out for the year after week 11. It's hard to remember, but when things are clicking, the Bengals offense is one of the best in the league. And there was even a stretch last season between those Burrow injuries where the team appeared to figure things out and the offense was getting back to form. Even with those highs and lows of 2023, Joe Mixon still finished as the running back 5 overall in half PPR, the 5th best in the entire NFL, and he was the running back 12 in points per game. Mixon is a fine running back. He's past his prime, and I don't think anyone would classify the 2023 version of Joe Mixon as anything more than a good but not necessarily great running back. Well, he's gone after being traded to the Houston Texans, and that opens up a ton of opportunity in the running back room. That is where Zach Moss and Chase Brown might be interesting for fantasy. It's hard to say as of this recording who will be the starter, but I think it's likely we see a real committee approach between these two, and I expect Moss to probably have more of that early down role, with Brown being more involved in the passing game. Monitor the news to see if either one takes a real grasp of the starter role, but I think both of these guys can be valuable as a 0 RB target. As of this recording, there's been a little bit of Chase Brown hype. He might get more volume than expected if those trends continue, but I still think this will be a bit of a committee. It's very rare you see one running back dominate a running back room like Christian McCaffrey does, or Kyron Williams did last year, or Travis Etienne did last year. And if anyone is going to dominate, I don't know if it'll be Zach Moss or Chase Brown. As long as they're both healthy, I think they'll both be involved. Chase Brown flashed as a rookie for the Bengals last season, and Zach Moss filled in very admirably for Jonathan Taylor when he was injured on the Colts last season, and he was a waiver wire darling. He won people weeks. If the Bengals offense can bounce back with a defense that doesn't project to be elite, there's opportunity for fantasy goodness here with Joe Mixon out the door. Both Moss and Brown project to see work, but if one goes down, the other becomes even more valuable for fantasy because they will see that increase in volume. From what I could tell from ADP, Moss was around the 7th round in ADP as the running back 26, and Chase Brown was even later in the 9th or 10th round, or even later at running back 38. So both of these guys could be really good 0 RB values who get volume early on in the season. So even those guys, if you're not doing 0 RB, even if you go hero RB where you drafted, Christian McCaffrey 101, and then you don't draft another running back until late, one of those guys might be a good target. My next 0 running back target is honestly a true 0 RB target. I would not be drafting this guy if I loaded up on running backs early, and that is Jerome Ford, running back of the Cleveland Browns. Superstar running back Nick Chubb destroyed his knee in week 2 of 2023 for the Browns last year. If anyone can overcome that injury at age 28, soon to be 29 in December, it's Nick Chubb, but the odds are definitely stacked against him, and there's a good chance that he misses the beginning of the season and gets worked in slowly when he does return. I don't love Jerome Ford as a pick overall, like I said, as I don't know if the season-long value will be there as Nick Chubb gets worked in, and even if Chubb isn't the same player, if he's healthy and on the field, he figures to probably see the bulk of the workload, but I do love Jerome Ford specifically in 0 RB drafts. He should see solid volume to start the season as Chubb works back from that devastating injury, which is what 0 running back managers need from the draft as they build up that running back room over the course of the season. Ford is basically free in drafts right now. He's often going in the double-digit rounds as the running back 40 off the board. There's literally no risk here. You can play him to start the year, and then you can cut bait if and when Nick Chubb comes back and takes over. If Chubb returns and he's not the same player and Ford continues to have a role, or if Nick Chubb has an injury setback, that is where Ford becomes a real steal and has season-long potential to be a starter for you. Chubb got hurt in week 2 last year. Ford came in and finished that game with 22.6 half PPR points. And from that week 2 to 17, Jerome Ford was the running back 13 overall with 12.2 half PPR points per game. On the depth chart right now, the Browns also have Pierre Strong, Naheem Hines, and they also brought in Deontay Foreman. But even if they have a role, like if Deontay Foreman vultures some touchdowns, Ford put up those numbers. He put up that production that I just read off in 2023 with Kareem Hunt scoring 9 touchdowns for them. Kareem Hunt was brought in after Chubb got hurt. Now he's off the roster, and he scored 9 touchdowns, and Ford was still a solid play in fantasy last year. I don't expect Ford to be a league winner, but he should provide steady running back 2 or flex value to start the season. We're going to move on to number 4, Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers drafted Jonathan Brooks in the second round of the 2024 NFL draft to be the guy of the future, but the future might have to wait. Okay, the future is coming, but it is not quite here as Jonathan Brooks recovers from a torn ACL he suffered in college last November. Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders should start the season in a committee. While Sanders got the bag of money last season, Chuba actually played Miles Sanders off the field and was fantasy relevant at times last year. He actually had a stretch where he was the running back 9 overall from weeks 12 to 18. The Panthers offense was dreadful in 2023, and unless Bryce Young and this team can turn things around, scoring opportunities could be limited in 2024, and the offense could suffer like we saw last year. But even then, in a dreadful offense, Chuba had a valuable stretch for fantasy, and the offense really can't get that much worse. Like if it gets worse, it's going to be insane. Like it'll be one of the worst offenses ever. But with all that being said, in the double-digit rounds as the running back 44 off the board, Chuba Hubbard is worth a shot to offer early season flex value for 0 running back teams. We're going to move on to number 5. My number 5 0 RB target for the 2024 fantasy football season is Gus Edwards of the LA Chargers. The Gus bus has a great opportunity for volume with the Chargers in 2024. Over the offseason, the team lost former star running back Austin Eckler, stud wide receiver, future Hall of Famer Keenan Allen, and less of a stud but still valuable wide receiver Mike Williams. The team did bring in new head coach Jim Harbaugh and offensive coordinator Greg Roman. They still have Justin Herbert at quarterback. He's often regarded as one of the best young talents at the position in the entire NFL. But given the lack of wide receiver options and what we know to be absolutely true about his new coaching staff, they will want to run the ball. They're going to want to run it a fair amount. This isn't the 1920s. They're going to have to, throw the ball somewhat. But if this coaching staff can have it their way, they will be running the ball a lot. The running back room is pretty weak behind Gus Edwards. J.K. Dobbins is on the roster, and while he was once an exciting prospect, injuries have just absolutely derailed his career. And I think his ceiling in 2024 is being part of a committee with Gus. The team also drafted a late-round running back in Kimani Vidal, and they signed Jarrett Patterson. So, again, not a lot of competition for touches. Any of those guys, Gus Bus, Vidal, J.K. Dobbins, they might be worth a late-round flyer, but I think Gus Bus has the most secure role, and I think he's the best 0 running back target of the 3, just because I expect him to get the goal line work. He finished 2023 with the Ravens with 810 yards on 198 carries, so not a ton of volume, but he also had 13 rushing touchdowns. 13. That's an insane number. That number will be hard to replicate, and he doesn't project to have much of a pass-catching role just based on what we've seen from him in his career, but that touchdown number shows his ability to score, and he does project to be this team's goal line back. It's not a super exciting pick, but in the 9th round or double-digit rounds or later, at running back 39 in ADP, according to Fantasy Pros, he should see enough volume and goal line opportunities to have his weeks and be a solid 0 running back pick. And those were my top 5 0 running back targets. And I'm going to give you one more. We got a bonus, baby. That's right. You thought I was going to just give you 5. No, sir. No, ma'am. No, madam. At the Fantasy Football Prodigy podcast channel, we go above and beyond. I have a bonus 0 running back target. But before we get into that, if you want to hear that target, The price of admission is one subscription or one follow wherever you are listening, so you can stay tuned for more fantasy football goodness and become a league champion and become a fantasy football prodigy, because that's what we're here to do. So thank you for your follow. Thank you for your sub. Thank you for your like. Thank you for being you. I hope you're hydrated and having a good day. Let's get into the sixth and actually final zero RB target of the episode. It's not one that I'm happy to talk about. It's not exciting, but it's one that must be talked about, and that is Ezekiel Elliott, a bonus player. Zeke is back on the Dallas Cowboys after a 1-year stint with the Patriots. He had a Hall of Fame career with the Cowboys. He's aged out. At age 29, he has certainly passed his prime, but the once great running back has a crazy opportunity on an electric offense in 2024. And it would not surprise me if we look back and we wonder, why were we overlooking Zeke? It was so obvious. Last season, New England's starting running back Ramondre Stevenson, he missed weeks 14 through 18 with injury. During that stretch as the starter, Zeke saw a huge increase in opportunity, and he was the running back 10 with 13.7 half PPR points per game. You could also include week 13 in that stretch too, where Zeke also saw a bunch of volume, and he was the running back 9 from weeks 13 to 18 with 13.3 half PPR points per game. By all metrics, he was not a good runner. This was not a talent-based outcome. He just was not the same player that he used to be. He's more of a plotter at this stage of his career, but he saw healthy volume on the ground, and more importantly, he saw volume in the passing game. The only competition in Dallas right now is Rico Dowdle, Royce Freeman, and Malik Davis. Now, I had Rico Dowdle in Dynasty, and I dropped him last year. So based on that, it would not surprise me if Rico Dowdle comes out and has 2,000 rushing yards and 30 touchdowns. Keep in mind, I dropped Raheem Mostert like 5+ years ago when he was like a 3rd or 4th string running back, and look at him now. He's breaking all the trends. He scored 20+ touchdowns at age 31 or whatever he was. But I digress. I expect this to be a committee. Putting my Dynasty woes aside, I do think it'll be a committee, but I think there's a really good chance that Zeke is the head of that committee. He sees passing game involvement and has scoring opportunities at the goal line for what should be a top-tier offense in 2024. Tony Pollard last year was drafted high for this offense, and he was a bust, largely because of his inefficiencies on the goal line. He could not punch it in. Even though Zeke is past his prime, I still think that part of his game is there. He has a nose for the end zone. I think he can still be their goal line back, and it's hard to be worse than Tony Pollard was for them in 2023 in terms of goal line success. And you're getting this guy, Ezekiel Elliott, at a insane discount compared to Tony Pollard. Wasn't Pollard like a 2nd round pick last year? 1st, 2nd, something like that? This is all about value. And while I might avoid Zeke if the costs were too high, he is currently going off the board in the 9th round or even later. It just depends on what ADP you're looking at. But he's going off the board as the running back 36. And I love that value at the ADP, especially for zero RB teams who need that early season volume. He's getting older for the running back position. He might fade over the back half of the year, but at least early on in the season, I think he's going to be involved. You know, teams, it's often overlooked the value of having a veteran running back who you can trust to just do the right thing. And I think he's going to see work on the field, and he's going to get that goal line work. So at least that's what I project. So I think Zeke is being very overlooked right now. Don't expect him to be a league winner, but I think he'll be a nice addition to a team looking for running back help. And that's it. That's the list. No more bonus items. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Fantasy Football Prodigy podcast. I hope you enjoyed. I know I enjoyed creating it, podcasting it, and delivering it. It was a lot of fun. Make sure you like the video wherever you're watching. If you can like it, if you're on YouTube, hi, I'm waving at you. If you want video, I do have video on the YouTube channel. But thank you for listening wherever you are listening. Make sure to subscribe or follow wherever that might be. I will see you guys in the next one. We're going to become fantasy football prodigies, and we're going to win our leagues this year. And let's get it. Peace out.